to another episode of your favorite swimbait podcast, Scales and Tails, episode 163. I know it's been a while. It's been a couple weeks since you guys have gotten to listen to the podcast, and I apologize. Life has gotten busy working on the zine, working on some video stuff right now, trying to make some plans for the 2025 year and season, and it's just been very, very hectic on top of working an actual job now. It's just not panning out very well, but we are gonna work through it and we are gonna prevail. But we are joined by a gentleman from Florida who I think is probably the youngest guest we've ever had on, and I'm excited about this one. If you guys like listening to Marshall and I's episodes, this is probably going to be an equivalent to that. So if that's something you enjoy, you're going to be in for a good one today. We're joined by Mr. NolesFishing, who maybe you guys are familiar with, maybe you aren't. But I think after this one, you guys will be like, okay, I need to go follow him because he is the spitting image of what these Marshall episodes sound like and kind of what Marshall does essentially. So, Mr. Nole, how old are you? Where are you at in Florida? And kind of what do you do?
Okay, I was actually just about to ask. First of all, thank you for all the kind words. I really appreciate it. I am okay. I want you to guess. How old do you think I am?
I'm gonna go 15.
15.
Is that
Okay,
high?
I think that's a little low actually. That's a little low.
Okay, okay. So I'll go
I'm 17. I'm
17.
17
Okay, okay.
actually.
I was gonna say 16, but I'm like, man, I don't know if he can drive. Like, I never see you in the whip or anything. So I'm like, man, I don't know. We'll just spit out 15. Dude, I thought you were about to turn around and say, no, I'm 13 or something crazy like that. No, I'm 12. I'm gonna be 13 next July or something crazy.
This is actually my 11th birthday. No, but we fished with Marshall the first. I fished with Marshall for the first time this week or last week, I think, and he thought I was a freshman in high school, which I think is like 15 or 16. So
So
he also guessed it.
Marshall and I were on the same field. We were on the same vision path there. So I guess yeah, we'll talk about where you're from and stuff, and then we'll talk about kind of you getting to fish with Marshall last week and kind of oh, I will say I have to publicly say this before I forget. Marshall said he's going to tie a cinder block to your leg and throw you into the water tomorrow. So just beware that you know that's coming, foreshadowing. So when you guys are listening to this episode, Knowles will actually be drowned by Marshall by the time this rolls out. So RIP. But I guess go talk about kind of who you are, where you're at in Florida, and then we'll go in chronological order about getting into fishing, swim fishing, and all that good stuff.
Right. Well, my real name is Nole. Okay. So I do have to clarify the acronym or not acronym. I don't know what the proper English grammar term is, but the Knowles fishing tag on Instagram is meant to be kind of phrased as Nole is fishing,
Yeah.
but it's whatever. It doesn't matter.
Well,
But
it's kind of weird.
uh,
I've never seen a singular James before. It's always James. It's never, hey James, how's it going? It's always James. So I didn't know if it was Knowles
yeah,
or if it
yeah.
was Noel. And Marshall said it's Noel, but I like calling him Knowles because it's funny.
Yeah, he told me, he said, I'm only gonna call you Knowles. And I said, all right, cool. I'm fine with that.
You should only start referring to him as the homeless fisherman whenever you talk to him. Don't say Marsh or Marshall or anything. Just say the homeless fisherman.
That's
Say
actually a
that
good
tomorrow and
idea.
see how long until he catches on.
And he's gonna throw me overboard with a cinder. Brian said the same thing.
What's
He
that?
said
The
he's gonna
Knowles?
throw me over.
Oh, there you
No,
go.
he said he's gonna throw me overboard with a cinder block, and I said you got to get a boat first. I don't know. I
Oh,
don't know how he felt about that.
classic. So you are in Florida. Are you by Orlando or kind of like what part of Florida? Where are you at essentially? You know, we don't need to dox yourself or anything, but like
Yeah,
what
of
big
course, of
city are you
course.
around?
I'm very close to Orlando. I'm kind of in between Orlando and Oviedo.
Okay. Okay. So you kind of have like a pretty like chill year all year, right? Like you guys don't have any crazy winter. Like it probably gets down to what, like 50s down there in the wintertime?
Yeah, the winters are never really unbearable, so
That's good. Are
it's
you
nice.
able to fish throughout the year?
It does get difficult in the winter and like during the transition times, and of course in the summer too. But it's always fishable, which is amazing.
That is Very nice. I know Marshall is down there and I don't know, like Texas, I feel like Texas would be a hard sell to leave for the winter, but Marshall has obligations and stuff down there, so it makes sense. And that's
Hmm.
why I never, it always just talked about how the southern strain fish just like get the piss beat out of them by like a 10-degree change, whereas our fish up here, like you can catch them on top water when it's 40 degrees outside in April, and your guys' fish are damn near buried in the mud. It's always interesting to kind of hear what southern guys have to say about their winter fishing relative to like our summer fishing. Our northern strains are pretty much floating up belly up in the summertime around here.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like no matter where you are, the winter is always going to be kind of rough compared to the rest of the year. But it's never really that bad, to be honest. Like you could always catch them down here.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. As long as you try, you're gonna at least get a shot at them. So
Oh yeah,
being 17, so you were born, oh geez, 2005? No,
2007.
seven. Geez, I was way off. So how and when did you get into fishing? Have you always lived in Florida or did you guys move down there or kind of what's the story growing up and getting into fishing where we're at today?
So I've always been in Florida, and I didn't really catch on to the hobby first. The first hobby that I really caught on to was baseball. I really liked baseball growing up, and I played in like a little rec ball league, which is like it's just for fun. And I met a lot of my friends who I'm still friends with today. And one of my friends in specific, he had this pond by his house, and I would go to his house like every weekend, and we would just do the same stuff over and over again. And then I guess one day a a switch flipped, and I was like, "Hey, do you want to go fishing?" And he said, "Yeah, sure." And so we went down to his pond, and we were just throwing like bread, and we caught some bluegill, and then I remember this very vividly because this was one of my great fishing memories. We were fishing for these bluegill, and the water was super clear, and we had these bread balls in the water, and we see this like giant carp come out of nowhere, and he kind of just like pulls up on the bank and then goes right over our little bread balls, and then he swam away. And he was, I mean, I don't know how big he was now, but he was the biggest fish I've ever seen in my life, and so we made it an obligation to go out there and try and catch him. So that's kind of what got me started. Like we would just go back there all the time and fish, and didn't really care too much about it. Like it was just a nice pastime.
Heck yeah, dude. How old were you when that was kind of starting to unfold for you? I've got three words for you. Lake Pro Tackle. Lake Pro Tackle has all the gear you need to be ready to have a successful day on the water. Friends of the podcast receive 10% off your orders while using code SCALES at checkout. Checking out with code SCALES not only saves you guys some money, but it also helps me host more giveaways to give back to you guys, the listeners. On their website, you can find exclusive and rare swim baits, JDM and BFS products, and of course, conventional tackle. I can't forget to mention Lake Pro Tackle gets the monthly throwback shop colors at the beginning of every month. Also, orders over $50 get free shipping, including rods. So do me a favor and remember to use code SCALES at checkout to save 10% at lakeprotackle.com. The vast majority of double-digit bass caught in Mexico are caught out of two lakes, Lake Bacharach and Lake El Salto. Josh Daniels Pro Bass Adventures is the only outfitter in Mexico with lodges on both of these trophy lakes. With a fleet of Ranger boats at Lake El Salto and Live Scope Plus at Lake Bacharach, Pro Bass Adventures has the best equipped guides and boats in Mexico. Better call Pro Bass 480-491-9300 or probassadventures.com. We are Mexico Fishing. Staring at that peanut butter jelly like a largemouth bass staring at a dollar store worm? Then it's time to upgrade your snackulation. Meat Crafters line of handmade small batch pre-sliced salamis and our charcuterie make the perfect base for your weekend snackle box. Fill a Plano 3600 with an assortment of Meat Crafters old style salami and charcuterie and you're sure to become the boat ramp champ. Listeners of the show can use code SCALES and SLICES at checkout on meatcrafters.com to save 20% off your cart. The code can be used as many times as you want so you'll never run out of fuel for your pursuit of giants. So the next time you reach into your fridge to load up your boat cooler, skip the fish food and grab the stack of Meat Crafters pre-sliced packs. They're guaranteed to exceed your PB.
If I had to guess, I'd say 9 or 10.
Okay. So it was probably around, well, so that's kind of the same with me. Like I was kind of into fishing, but I wasn't necessarily into it. And then like fast forward 3 or 4 years later, something happened and I just like got seriously involved into it. Is that kind of what happened for you too?
Yeah, I had a bunch of friends in that baseball league who fished, and we would always hang out. And then so first it was like just the bluegill in my friend's front yard, and then it turned into bass stuff. Like my friend showed me how to fish for bass, and I started doing that, and then I really caught on to it. I don't know exactly when, but I guess I just did it more often, and I don't know what happened, dude. It just clicked something in my brain, and I started doing it all the time.
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly what happened for me too. It's kind of a weird thing to look back on because like I know at one point in time I was just having fun going out there and then something flipped where I can remember like staying up and watching all the fishing videos and buying stuff and I don't know when or how or like you said when exactly it happened, but it did and then fast
Hmm.
forward and we're here now, which is kind of crazy to think about.
Yeah.
So you get into it
Um.
and you start to learn how to bass fish. Were you like fishing Senkos and stuff or kind of like what I guess growing up in Florida bass fishing and growing up here in bass fishing, I feel like can be two completely different things. So kind of how did you get into
Mhm.
bass fishing down there?
So I'd say, yeah, 100%. I definitely started with the worms. I think it must have been the Senka was the first thing I ever threw, and I caught some fish on it. And I was never really interested in the specifics of it. Like I was never interested in like water temperature and what season it was. Like I would just go out there and I'd throw a worm and it would get bit. And then after I fished the Senko for a little bit, I kind of expanded my palate. Like I started fishing flukes and stuff. But those were like the main two that really stuck with me.
Right, yeah. And are you pretty much just bouncing around on like neighborhood ponds and friends' ponds and stuff like that?
Hmm. Yeah, it's been majority like ponds for my whole life up until
Right.
recently.
And I mean, that's like really what a 13, 14-year-old kid has to work with in Florida. It's not like you're able to go rent a boat or go out, you have friends with a bass boat or whatever else it may be and go out on Okeechobee or some other lake. Like it's
Yeah.
pretty limited to a point down there,
Hmm. Yeah.
which is really weird to think about because like up here you have all the rivers and you have all these small lakes where I mean, slightly bigger than a pond that you can just take a kayak out to. And I mean, up here, yes, we have ponds, but we don't have like anything like, Florida, Georgia, Alabama, like a lot of those
Hmm.
places like have subdivision ponds and stuff. As far as my knowledge, like that's not really a thing around here, which is kind of interesting when you're first getting into it because you're watching these videos of guys in like Florida and Texas and stuff like when the Guggen squad were before that actually they would always be pond fishing in like Chicago and stuff and it's like well how can I pull that information and relate it to my 500 acre, quote unquote small lake that I fish. Like how
Hmm.
can I even do that? Cause like when you're watching videos like that, I mean, it's essentially guys just casting and fish being set up there. How can I present that to a lake that has structure and underwater rocks and whatever else? It's kind of it's definitely a learning curve on top of a learning curve.
Oh yeah. Hmm.
So you get into it, you kind of getting fishing some lake or fishing some ponds and getting flukes and senkos and stuff. Do you remember ever seeing anybody like fish really big swim baits or any swim baits in general? Like down there, I feel like if you see it, it's like a guy who's fishing saltwater who just so happens to, or maybe even not swim baits, but like any big baits, like a 12-inch curly tail worm or anything crazy down there.
Hmm. Um, if I don't think so. I mean, I've always taught like I've never really had an older role model to like teach me about fishing. At least like in my life. Like I can look up YouTube videos, watch anyone fish, but I've never
Yeah.
really had anyone who was older than me, like my dad or an uncle or something, who taught me how to fish. Like I learned it all mostly by myself and with my friends, but I don't think I've ever. I don't think I recall seeing anyone throw big swim baits and stuff.
Yeah, and I can like I know exactly what you're talking about, like kind of being left to your own creatives kind of because I grew up and my whole family was really big into river fishing for like salmon and steelhead and trout and stuff and that's kind of where my family did everything, and like my uncle's in the Freshwater Hall of Fame and they all were charter captains and stuff. So to turn around and to be into bass fishing, it was kind of like I was the bastard child. It was very, very weird to look on for them. So, I mean, everything that I learned was from YouTube. I wish I could know how many hours of YouTube I watched to learn like how to rig Senkos, because I didn't know how to rig a
Hmm.
freaking straight tail worm on a hook with a
Yeah.
90-degree angle in it. Like a lot of the stuff I learned was strictly from YouTube. And it's kind of interesting that you said it, because I feel like the fishing scene in Florida is kind of very open and vast. Like you could probably, there's a good chance you could stumble onto somebody at a pond and start talking to them and get to be friends with them. But it doesn't really seem like that was the case for you. It was just more so you just figuring stuff out yourself.
Hmm. Yeah, it was I don't know. I don't think I would change it if I could go back, I don't think I'd change it because I think learning from myself was like it helped me learn a lot. Like it helped me learn a lot of skills outside of fishing too, like just teaching myself like a new sport and like how to do certain things. And then like actually seeing the results was
Hmm.
shocking. It was a big kind of open my mind to newer things.
Yeah, the thing I look back on and think, like, if I had somebody who helped me get into it, how would my fishing nowadays differ from it? Like, if I fished with somebody who
Hmm.
could crack them on a jig and just be an absolute stud of a jig fisherman, would I have the confidence in picking up a jig outside of a chatterbait or a swim jig? Like I don't have any confidence in a
Hmm.
jig or anything skirted like a jig or bottom contact bait like that. If I would have grown up and fished with somebody for 2 years that couldn't put down a jig, like would I even be into swim baits, or would I be a guy who only wants to flip cover and flip docks and stuff with big half-ounce, 1 ounce football jigs? So it's kind of interesting to see, because like you see young guys who are absolute hammers with one technique because that's what their dad does, and then they kind of they hear about something else and they're just like, I have never caught a fish on a crankbait or a lipless crankbait because all we do is fish shallow. So it's interesting to see how people are molded from behind the people who they fish with. It's really interesting to see.
Hmm.
Whereas like if you fish alone, you're left to your own imagination. Like, oh, this looks like a cool bait. I'm gonna buy it and watch a YouTube video on it, and I'm gonna go out and fish for 10 hours till I catch a fish on it. It's I don't know. I haven't really thought about that until right now. How you're essentially mirroring whoever you fish with, and that could be for the better or for the worse, however you want to look at it. It's interesting to think how much it would be different if you did, learn from an uncle or a dad or a grandpa or whoever else it may be. It's kind of interesting to think about, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said before, like I never really had anyone older who taught me. Like it was just my friends who showed me some stuff. So like they would show me how to fish a worm. So even if I went by myself or if I was with 10 people, I would just throw the worm and do what I know.
Yeah. Do you do you remember your first good bass, or like your first decent bass that you had caught?
I do actually. So there's this restaurant that we would go to after a lot of our baseball games. And I don't know where it came from, but I guess the rod magically appeared with a fluke on it. And so I was throwing it around, and there were like a bunch of kids on the dock watching, and I pulled up. I want to say it was like a 3 or a 3.5, and that was the first fish. And this lake is fished publicly a lot, so I saw that fish, and I can say confidently that was kind of the fish that started it all. Like where I realized like okay, that was really fun. I wonder how much more it can get than that. Like I wonder how far I could take it.
Yeah, right. That's funny. Did everybody like cheer for you, or was everybody freaking out? Oh my gosh, you caught a giant.
Yeah, yeah, there were a lot of people freaking out and they were saying, "What is it?" And they're like asking me a bunch of questions. I didn't know how to answer them, so I just let my fish speak for itself.
Yeah, which I had to flex on him a little bit. After that, like, were
Oh
you
yeah, always.
hooked on it? Were you hooked on it anymore after that?
Oh yeah, 100%. I think that's the around the time where I started going by myself and like really learning new things because I was never like before then I never really wanted to try anything new. Like I was like when it came to baseball, like I was very I was very into baseball and and then like my friends showed me some fishing stuff and then that happened and I was kind of like, okay, I wonder I wonder what more I could learn about this. And that's kind of when I started watching YouTube videos on how to do different things and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's interesting. What was like, did you have a technique that you wanted to get into that like you were always on the fence about or that you hadn't uh you know I guess really found like outside of the fluke and Senko where you're like, oh, I really want to get to fish at a crankbait or anything else like that or like top water or anything?
Not really. I think when I first learned about a jig, I kind of like football jigs, like bottom bouncing. That kind of like struck a nerve. Like I really wanted to learn that, and I tried it for a while, but I was no professional.
Yeah, dude. And I mean, for you to be a young kid in Florida fishing like ponds, I feel like when I envision a Florida pond, I think of like 13 feet deep and just a foot and a half of weeds up on or going up to the top. Like
Hmm.
I don't necessarily think of like a jig bite, whereas like a big lake, there's sporadic vegetation and stuff. So I mean, I definitely I could see like a young kid just absolutely getting hooked on like a frog or a popper bite in Florida, like super like starting
Hmm.
off like super
Hmm.
young.
Hmm. Yeah,
So
I did really want. I was also pretty into top water.
mm,
Like when I first picked up a frog and I fished it a little bit, I really wanted to get good at it. And I remember catching a few fish on the frog, but it was nothing. It was nothing super memorable, like size wise.
right, were you fishing a spinning rod this whole time up to this point?
Yeah. Hmm.
So at what point in time did you get your first bait caster and kind of what changes came with that in your fishing?
So the first time, it was actually my brother, I think, picked up a bait caster, and it was like I don't know, I didn't know a lot about it, but I knew that it was like the next step up. Like I knew it was harder to use but it would pay off. Like I did a little bit of research on it, and I really tried to learn it. And I don't mean to sound like a sore loser when I say this, and I'm not gonna say the brand or anything, but this had to have been the like the worst concoction on planet Earth when it comes to anything fishing related. Like this thing was, I don't know. You probably could have sold all the gears inside and parts for more than what the reel was actually worth. Like this thing was a piece of junk. So I never really learned it. And then I do remember it was one Thanksgiving I think where I really got into fishing. I was fishing probably 3 times a week and I was going by myself sometimes. And I asked my uncle if he could get me like this one bait caster. It was a Lose Xfinity. I actually still have the rod and the reel, but I don't use the reel. But yeah, I fished that for I want to say 4 years, 3 years. And I caught I that's when I really took the step up. Like when I got my own baitcaster and I learned how to do it, that's when it became way more fun.
Well, NolesFishing is media trained. He didn't drop any names just in case in 6 years he wants to get a sponsorship with him. He doesn't have any ill will towards him publicly. I like that, man. That was a good move. That was a good play. Was it by
Exactly.
chance the Abu Black
Exactly.
Max?
No, no, I love the Black Max. I got actually okay, I have to say this. I've never owned one myself, but I think m- the 5 friends that I fish with often, I think they have a total of like 13 of them, if I had to guess.
You talking about Black Maxes or the reels you don't like?
Yeah, yeah, Black Maxes.
Oh, okay.
I've fished plenty of them, but I've never owned one myself.
Oh man, I was gonna say, holy crap. So you get into it, you get the baitcaster and kind of like it's starting to like I guess maybe make more sense to you about getting into it like as a full-time, hobby or like a thing that you want to do. When so you got the baitcaster, was there anything else that like you were like, oh, because commonly portrayed is you need to have a bait caster to fish this technique, this technique, this technique, whatever, yada yada. Was there anything that like when you got that bait caster, did it open your eyes up to like, oh my gosh, I've always wanted to fish a jerk bait? Not that you need a bait caster for that or anything, crazy like that, or like frog fishing with a bait caster. Was there anything that like kind of opened the doors for when you got that bait caster?
I'd say one of the big ones was definitely frogs. Like all the ponds that I fished at the time had like a bunch of lily pads around it, and I could never really think of a way around it until I picked up a frog for the first time. That was one of the main ones. I'd say like moving baits too, like bladed jigs, like a chatterbait and a spinner bait. Those were both. I really wanted to fish those for a while, and I wasn't a fan of it on the spinning rod, and then once I got my bait caster, I fished them way more and made it way easier.
Yeah, yeah, right. So at what point in time did you kind of hear about swim baits? Was that like a couple years down the road that you heard about it or that you saw it maybe even? I would guess you probably saw it before you ever seen it in person or saw it at the lake or anything, pond.
hmm So I actually, believe it or not, I first heard about swim baits like at the beginning of this year. So like January, February. I don't know. Okay, so I always thought that like I've I knew that the one of the big step ups was tournament fishing and college fishing and stuff like that. And I was doing a little bit of research, like learning like specific techniques and how to fish certain times of the year. And I just like I wasn't the biggest fan of all the different. To put it simply, it was too much to learn for me at the time. I was like, man, this is too much work. I don't really want to do all that. And it was like I never really liked the idea of tournament fishing. Like fishing in a tournament with I don't know, it seemed kind of rough. And then before then I was watching like YouTubers and stuff, and I kind of realized that's the route I would want to take, if
Mhm.
any. Like if I really took fishing to like the max level that I could, I would want to be like an independent creator and like do my own stuff and not like follow
Yeah.
the sheep, I guess, if that's not offensive.
Right, right. It's well, fishing is kind of always meant to be like a lax thing that you go and do. You have fun with a couple buddies or, whatever it may be. You go and enjoy it how you want to, but you put it into a tournament setting. And have you ever fished a tournament at all?
I have a few times with minimal results, but I thought they were fun. I just thought the idea of it, like college and professional fishing, like in a tournament, I feel like that would be way too stressful for me.
Yeah, yeah. So like Wednesday nighters, like when you have 12 other boats, 13 other boats, under like 25 boats, it's usually a lot of fun. You know the guys you're fishing against. It's just you're just having a good time. You're fishing against like some local guys who are good on one lake, but the next week they suck because it's on a lake that they don't like to fish. So it's always a crapshoot. It's always fun. But when you go to like the next level where you're paying like $200 to fish per tournament, it's like so I do this to have fun, but here I am going out and just racking my brain for 8 hours on trying to catch these five fish, paranoid that
hmm
you're going to make the wrong move here or miss a fish here. It just kind of defuses the situation of being fun. Like, yes, it's fun for certain people, but for a lot of people, it's like, dude, like I like personally, I want to go out and I want to catch the biggest fish I can. One of them. I don't want to catch five
hmm
decent fish. I just want to go out and catch one fish. So it's a different mindset, but it's just like, I don't catch a fish. Oh well, I'm not out 200 or $1,000 or something for paying for this tournament,
hmm
plus boat fees and gas and trailer maintenance and everything else. It's I don't know, tournament when I was growing up, tournament fishing, and even I guess still kind of now, it almost seemed like it was glorified. Like that's what you had to do if you wanted to make it
hmm
in the fishing industry. And now, like you said, I mean, there's guys like Marshall and all the YouTubers you see now, and it's like, okay, like these guys can talk to a camera, drop 2 videos a week, have fun fishing, have funny challenges or fish these crazy baits or visit these other countries and make content. And they're making just as much money as a professional angler who does decent on a circuit. It's kind of it's interesting to see how the tides have changed with that.
hmm Yeah, exactly. And I another hobby that I picked up a lot when it was when it was COVID time, like when you couldn't really do anything, I did a lot of gaming.
Oh yeah,
And I kind of looked into like the professional stuff, and then I didn't really want to do that either. Like being the bet like having to be the best of the best at something and showing up with your A game every time, or else you're gonna see yourself as a failure. I wouldn't want to do that. So I wanted to be a video game YouTuber for a while, but I never really, I don't know, it just didn't feel, I don't know, it didn't really click with me. Like I did it
right.
for maybe like 6 months, and I wasn't really a fan after that.
Yeah, you weren't sold on that idea. And
Exactly.
that's like I don't know if you're familiar with UFC, but that's something that like I really enjoy.
hmm
And that's like, if you have one bad day, first off, you're gonna get your ass knocked out. Second off, you could lose your championship belt, be fucking shunned from the program. Like it's a type of fun that some people, live or die for. But at the end of the day, if you don't show up and do your very best, you could be fucking living on the streets the next year. Like
Exactly.
it's crazy. Like that is like putting everything on yourself and going for it, which not that YouTubers and stuff don't do that, but to the extent of like professional athletes or, anybody who competes at a high level for competition, it's like a really make it or break it thing. Like one bad game or one bad fight or, whatever it could be, one bad season and you're back to square zero.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, it's a really, really hard sell. But like I said, like some people absolutely live for that competition, and some people would rather just go out and maybe catch a bunch of bluegill or one big bass or whatever else it may be. But you got into swim baits, or so you were like looking at the tournament stuff. College fishing was something that I really wanted to do as well, but coming from like a lower middle class family and like reading that you fund your own stuff and all this other stuff, I was just like, well, I've had tournament experience in high school fishing against kids who come from a little bit more well-off background and just getting my teeth kicked in from bass fishing and
hmm
like ice fishing
hmm
tournaments and stuff. And it's like, is that how it's going to be on the next level? Because if so, then I'm just going to spend more money than what it's worth and I'm just not going to have a great time. So I guess what was your like the entry to the swim bait fishing? Were you just reading techniques and stuff from a college form, or kind of how did that all play out for you?
So I came to the realization that tournament fishing wasn't for me. That I hadn't really made any fishing videos at this point. Or no, scratch that. I've made a few, but it was just like I was catching small fish from ponds, and it kind of got boring after a few years, like catching 13 fish in a day on a Senko. Like it was fun for a while, but then it got really repetitive, and I couldn't really think of anything. Like I guess mastering a new technique didn't really click for me. Like being the best at fishing a jerkbait or a jig or a worm, like that
Mhm.
never really clicked for me. So I wish I could remember my very introduction to swim bait fishing, like the very first post that I saw, or the very first time I've ever heard of them. But I could say 100% that like my biggest influence to take the jump was definitely Marshall and Throwback, and the stuff that they have going. I guess I could say for sure that Marshall was the first like swim bait fisherman that I ever really watched and caught on to and learned a lot from.
Heck yeah, dude. I feel like that's a question, or that's an answer to the question that like a northern guy or somebody in the Midwest would say or East Coast because I grew up in Alabama, so like the fishing scene down south, I don't know if you've ever been up north, but it's like completely different. You walk into a tackle shop up here and it's like walleye stuff, trout stuff, and then here on this dusty shelf that you have to blow off to see anything, they've got banjo minnows and whatever else it may be, super like old, the Gary Yamotos and like the old packaging stuff. Whereas
hmm
like when I would go down to Alabama for like spring breaks or Florida for spring breaks and stuff throughout middle school, it would be like academies would have just rows and rows of stuff, and I was like, this is crazy. Like this is stuff that I've never seen before. I've only seen in videos. Like this is just wild. So I was assuming that you kind of stumbled upon it through like sporting goods shops, like you saw a Guggen bait or Molex or whatever the hell they sell in those stores now. But it makes sense how you were talking about kind of watching the YouTube guys and kind of feeling like that was sort of more the path you wanted to follow, and then Marshall being the one who the creator that you kind of watched and you're like, okay, maybe I want to try this swim bait thing out. I mean, that's kind of I feel like that's very fitting, and I feel like Marshall has done that for a lot of people, probably more people than we could ever guess.
Yeah, exactly. And it's crazy to think about because and I think I really dove into swim bait fishing like March, April, like around the summertime. And I learned about like the depth 250 and the Huddleston stuff that Butch Brown was doing. And the time range that it was in was crazy, like early 2000s, like
Before you were even
2010.
born.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it's crazy to think about the people are doing this way back then. And like I just see one video on Instagram, I'm like, oh, that's the one. And I like go with it. Like it's crazy to think about the influence that social media has had on like a bunch of different stuff, like sports
Yeah.
and media and everything you can think of.
Yeah, I mean it is very, very crazy. Like I knew Marshall, like I knew of Marshall like 3 years ago before he was the homeless fisherman. And I remember watching his videos like when he would fish bull shad and stuff, and it was always super cool. And then like fast forward 3 years later, I had him on the podcast and like we started talking after, and I was like, dude, I remember this video that you used to post and whatever, whatever. And I was just like, wow, it's crazy that it's crazy to think of how many of my friends I only get to see twice a year, and it's strictly from social media. Like that's something that wasn't a thing, even 10 years ago. So like you said, it is crazy to see.
Yeah, yeah, it's really cool.
And it's crap, what was I gonna say? Oh, the like the Huddleston and stuff. It's interesting that that stuff has kind of stood up to test of time. Maybe not necessarily in California, but when I saw that stuff when I was right around your age, I was probably a little bit younger, like 15 or 16, but like saw the Huddleston stuff, saw the 250 stuff, got those baits, and I remember being in the old forums on Facebook, and like I would make a post and I would just get like dog piled like, "Oh my gosh, the 250 works everywhere, whatever, whatever."
Hmm.
And then to see it with my own eyes, I'm like, "Oh my gosh." And then as I got older, I heard guys talk about like, "Oh, you can't really do that in California. You're going to be fishing a lot longer in California because those fish are kind of used to it." And meanwhile, I'm doing it here and I'm having, not necessarily fish experiences like Butch, but I'm having fish come unglued, wolf packs follow baits in, big fish eating baits and missing hooks and shaking off fish. And dude, I talk about it. I thought I was going pro. When I found swim baits and like I would catch 25 fish in a day, I thought I was going to win the Bassmaster Classic. Like I'm like, "Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, why are more people not doing this? Like this is a cheat code. I am the best angler in the state of Michigan, maybe the world. I don't know. It hasn't been confirmed yet at that point." But it was like, dude, it was crazy. So was that, I guess, what was your experiences like after finding Marshall and kind of Butch and stuff? What was your first bait you purchased and kind of what was your experience with that bait?
Okay, so believe it or not, right? And I know a lot of people start with a mag draft, an S waiver. I pulled the trigger and I bought a wake walker immediately. I picked up like a. It looks exactly like the one that they have on Tackle Warehouse. It looks like that one. Um, it was some light gill color, and I don't know. I guess I don't want to say I'm a super genius for picking up this bait, but it was the perfect size to where I could fish it in a pond or a lake or anything. The fish weren't too intimidated by it. I remember the first time I took it out, actually, I want to say three fish. They were probably around two and a half to three and a half, and I had some fish follow it up, and so that was uh that was kind of the all the confidence I needed. Like I I I I went out one time with it, fished for 3 hours, caught three decent fish, had a few decent fish follow it, and that was really all I needed to pick up some more stuff. And I'm kind of glad it was that way. Like I don't know. I'm kind of glad that I didn't go out like 8 times and get skunked and then catch one giant on a big bait and then go and buy a bunch of stuff. I'm kind of glad it happened sooner than later.
Dude, what a flex for your first bait being the wake walker right off the rip.
Yeah, exactly.
Were you
hmm
fishing that with a convention like quote unquote like your loose setup? Is that what you were fishing that on?
I actually brought this up to Marshall, and it's kind of a sidetrack, but the rod rating on that rod has to be a live. Like, I feel like you could probably get away with throwing the wake walker on that. Like that thing is a broomstick, but it's landed me a bunch of fish. I love it. But I actually, I bought a dedicated setup for it. I think it was, I know the reel was a Tranx 300 with the fat power knob on it, and then I think the rod was a St. Croix Bass Mojo, whichever purple swim bait rod they have. It was like a one to
Yeah,
four
something like
ounce.
that. So you're down south, like I said, you guys kind of have a more traditional bass fishing scene. Were you able to buy all that stuff like from your outdoor shop, or did you have to order that stuff?
Well, when I first, I took the swim baits out a few times, and I was like, dude, these are sick. I kind of want to get more of them. And I'd go to like Bass Pro, and they'd have they had like the Nessies. I think this was around the time when I first saw the Chad Shad for the first time, and I picked up one of those. But all the baits that I've picked up that have come from like Bass Pro or Academy, I'm just not the biggest fan of them. There's some that I like a lot, but like the Chad Shad, for example, like that's a great bait, $60. You can pick it up in almost any like mass retail store. But there's some other ones that I'm not a fan of, and so I'm kind of at the point where I would rather stick to just ordering them like off Tackle Warehouse instead
Hmm.
of going somewhere in person to get my hands on them faster.
Right. Have you ordered or have you like bought any off like Facebook or Underground or anything, or have you stick to like the retail, I guess like the retail side of things?
When I first discovered Underground, I picked up a few baits because I kind of realized you could trade too, which was like a big eye opener. Because like if I like this bait and I pick up something that's similar and I don't like it, I could trade it for something that maybe someone would want it more than me, and they have something that they could offer for me that I'd want more than them. So it's like I know I traded a few baits and I picked up some baits. I got my first TK off a trade on Swimbait Underground because I heard it was the greatest glide bait of all time, and I fished it and I loved it. And I don't know, I haven't I can't say too much honestly because I haven't fished it like in all the different modes they have and stuff, but I have caught a handful of decent fish on the TK. So that was one purchase I can, or one trick, like one thing that I got used that I can remember that has done me a lot.
Right. It's kind of like you were talking about it, and I haven't traded a bait in a while, but it just it sounds like a very sketchy thing trading baits with random people online. Not saying that it isn't, but you said that and I just kind of laughed because I do not remember the last time I traded a bait. I remember how kind of sketchy it is. It's like meeting somebody in an alleyway to like buy something from, buy drugs or something off of Facebook Marketplace. It's just very, very funny to think about trading hundreds of dollars worth of swim baits with somebody and hoping that the postal service gets it there and vice versa. You get yours from them. It's very funny to think about.
Yeah, exactly. I actually do have one bad experience that I could think of off the top of my head when it comes to like trading stuff. Um, I had this, I had this OG Calcutta 200. It's like before they had the Conquest. It was like a four something to one gear ratio, and I stuck this. This is the only way I remember. I stuck this giant Gomex's handle on there. It was like 120 millimeters because I
The
was like,
biggest they
man, I
make.
can't deal with this 4-to-7 gear ratio. I got to get a giant handle to fix it. And so and I took it out and I caught it like I think it was a 3.5 on a frog, and I realized the drag on it was super bad, and I didn't really consider the idea of like just buying new parts for and like kind of upgrading the internals. So I was gonna trade it for this Corrado DC, and I shipped it there, and then the guy said that he had sold the reel before like I told him that
Oh,
my Calcutta was on the way. So I was like, "Oh, if you could just ship it back, that'd be great. Have a good one." And he was like, "Yeah, sure."
radio
And
silence.
I kept following up on him. I was like, "Hey, is it coming back? Hey, is it coming back?" and then I messaged him one day, and it said this user cannot be reached, and I was like, okay, so I know what happened. And and this is the crazy part. Like, it'd be a pretty mediocre story if that's where it ended, but I was going through underground. I want to say it was like a month later, and I saw this lot with some throwbacks and an OG Calcutta, and I was like, man, I haven't seen OG Calcutta on here yet. And I click on it, and sure enough, it's got the same scratches like on the side plate. It's got this giant Gomex's handle on it, and I'm like, dude, that is my reel. And so I asked the guy on Underground. I was like, hey, do you know who sold that to you? And he like gave me the guy's Facebook, and I like made a new account, and I like messaged him, and then he sent me some money for a replacement, which was pretty nice. But I just spent it all immediately, probably on some from Throwback. I don't even remember what I used it
Do you
on,
want to
but
do you want to do you want to say who it was?
I do not want to say who it was. Actually, hold on, wait. I hope I have the dude's name. If I could find it, if I could find it in a second,
Worst case scenario, I can
I'll
bleep it out, or you can
give
just
it
tell me after.
Oh yeah. I'll tell you after. I'll tell you
Okay,
after.
okay, perfect. All right. We won't publicly dox them, but if it's somebody who I know who isn't a very good person, maybe I'll say it. But anyway,
Okay,
so
perfect.
yeah, trading baits, very interesting thing. But so you buying the throwback stuff, was that like from Marshall and then experiencing fishing with the Wake Walker where you're like, I just want to try everything that they make?
Yeah, it was definitely from Marshall, from what I can remember. And I picked up a Wake Walker. I picked up two actually. I picked up the gill one, and then I picked up like a pink vibrant gill one just to see if I could catch a fish on it. And I was it was like it was the dead of summer. So now that I think back on it, maybe it wasn't the most ideal first bait, but I was still getting fish unglued for it in these ponds that I see people fish all the time, like worms and spinner baits and chatterbaits and everything that you could think of conventional wise. So when I go there with this quote unquote big bait, my first big swim bait, and I catch three or four fish on it and have some follow it up, that was kind of the that was kind of like my sign, I guess, where I was like, okay, yeah, I guess I'm doing something right. And then I picked up a flea shad too, and I fished that for a little bit, caught some fish on it. And yeah, I kind of my first little swim bait endeavor was definitely the throwback lineup, and then I expanded to stuff like the DRT stuff and the working class zero stuff.
Yeah, so it's funny how like I don't know how your fishing experience differs because where you're located. Like glide baits were the thing that I fell in love with. Never had much luck with wake baits until like this year. And there you are down there with like the wake walker and stuff and like having pretty good success. It's kind of funny how much different it is in the course of a couple thousand miles. It's funny to think about like even just fishing ponds and stuff. Like you were just talking about how you were having a bunch of guys like catch fish and stuff, and you can go out there with a swim bait and turn around and catch fish out of there too. It's interesting to hear
Mm-hmm.
because people always talk about how pressured the ponds are and stuff, but when you go and chuck a 6-inch wake bait, those fish have never seen that before, so they aren't very shy about it.
Yeah, that's kind of I I learned that after the fact. Like I never really thought about pressure too much until I had that day with the wake walker. I was like, okay, why do these fish like it so much? And then I kind of started like learning about the swim bait stuff, like podcasts and shows and like just people talking about it in general. And pressure's one big part of it. And I was like, that's got to be it.
Yeah, it's funny. So when you were into like I guess or even earlier in the year, were you still learning a lot about bass fishing while you were getting into swim baits or while you were fishing swim baits and stuff outside of like bass behavior, but like were you paying more attention to like temperatures and moon phases and stuff like that?
Yeah, definitely. I I gotta say recently, like over the past maybe from May until now, I focused more on like the water temperature and the moon phase stuff. But like right when I got into swim bait fishing, I learned about like draw power. Like I never knew that was a thing. And I learned, and another thing I learned about is like, and this may sound a little bit shocking, I guess is the word. I don't know a better word, but I never really like I never really took into consideration like the bass is a lateral line. Like the wake walker has such a like it pushes so much water. I feel like that's something that like it attracts so much fish. So whether you catch a fish on that cast or not, I feel like if I'm fishing this small pond, these fish could feel this bait and they come up to it, like whether they eat it or not, that's fine with me. Like I'll find that one fish that'll eat it eventually. But yeah, I never really considered that when fishing like a bladed jig or anything. Like I it never clicked that's what it was for up until recently.
Yeah, and I feel like something that like a swim bait is a secondary thing where I think the only conventional bait that you could get it with is maybe a spinner bait where I or maybe a rattle bait too, but where it's giving off vibrations and it's clicking. Like
Hmm.
I don't know if you've ever like been in a pool or anything and like where you snap your finger or like crack your fingers or toes or something and it's like super loud. Like, dude, sound
Yeah.
travels really far in water. So to have water displacement and like a clicking, clacking coming through the water, like, dude, bass will pick up on that and either they're gonna like it or they're not, and you're just gonna have to deal with it. But like they know that that bait's there.
Yeah, exactly. And when I learned more about like showing like presenting something to the fish that they haven't seen before, that really resonated with me and that is kind of what made me like buy like a whole plethora of these swim baits that if you would have shown me them 3 years prior, I would have said what's gonna eat that, you
Yeah.
know?
And it's funny that that like my fish up here is starting to like get pressured, like they won't eat a drop shot anymore or like a dark sleep or anything, and they'll eat a they'll eat a swim bait. Like we have fishing pressure that's all finesse stuff. So if you go out there with a swim bait, they're gonna eat it. Whereas like down there by you, I'm sure those fish have literally seen damn near everything except for like big swim
Yeah.
baits, and that's kind of what's giving you the edge down there.
Hmm.
I have you in the last, couple months, have you ran across anybody else that you don't know fishing swim baits down there?
Well, when I first discovered it, I was telling my friends, I was like, hey, or I don't know. I don't know if I really told my friends about it. I guess we would just fish together and like, hey, what are you throwing? And I pull up this big bait and they didn't really get it at first, but I've talked to a few of my friends about it over the past few months, like since the beginning of summer, and I've kind of broken it down. Like I've tried to uh I've tried to put it in simple terms, like, hey, show the fish something they haven't seen before. Maybe that could be useful for some of your spots. And I have a few friends who kind of want to get into it and try it out. So I've been helping them a lot, and then uh, I mean it's crazy because I have a few friends like on the we fish the like we all fish the same spots, and I have friends who will go there with conventional and catch like they'll smoke them one day, and then the next day I go to a different spot with a swim bait, and I catch more fish than them. Like I don't know, it's weird. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I got into it, nobody wanted to, nobody cared, everybody thought I was crazy, spending a lot of money at the time, and people are like, the bass aren't that big around here, whatever it may be. And now fast forward a couple of years, I mean, I've caught a lot of really, really good fish up here. And even
Hmm.
there's people that I got into swim baits who have caught even bigger fish, like just in the course of this year than I have in the course of 5 years. So it's really like these fish still are not familiar with what these things are, and it's still kind of something that you can do uh quote unquote like year round up here where I mean even down there that's like what it sounds like too. They might be a little hesitant, but it's something that they don't see every day like they see a frog or a jig or a senko or whatever else it may be.
Yeah. And now that I'm thinking about it a little more, I was definitely like the first few times I went to those ponds with those big baits, I definitely did get a lot of people to ask me about it and stuff like that. And I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, I did get a lot of people who asked me about it and thought it was a little weird, but it didn't like that's not gonna stop me or shy me away from it. Like I've seen the results, so I'm not gonna let someone like if someone says it's stupid, but I've caught, 8 fish on it the day prior, it's not really gonna do anything.
Yeah, right. um I I almost wonder if people are more normalized to the big bait stuff down there because you are in Florida. The ocean is right around the corner. Like people are into saltwater fishing. Like whereas like if people saw me fishing the wake walker up here, they like freak out. Oh my gosh, I can't believe it. Whatever, whatever. Whereas somebody down there, they might be like, oh, my cousin fishes for saltwater. He fishes crazy, crazy baits, but that does look like a pretty big bait. Like there's two different sides to, oh my gosh, that lure's huge, I think.
Yeah. And there's been a few people who I follow like on TikTok a lot to where when I started picking up the swim baits, I also noticed that a lot of other people were like people who I followed for years prior who just make one example is Skip. I don't know if you know him, but he
Yeah.
made a bunch of saltwater content and then I don't want to say we picked it up at the same time, but he was but from what I've seen like on Instagram and TikTok and stuff, we kind of picked it up at the same
Mhm.
time, and I saw how useful it is in salt water too. Like he has a bunch of like crazy catches on these big baits,
Right.
which
And
is cool to see, like from
who's
coast
who's
to coast.
who's that other group that you follow? Is it the Backwater Boys? Is that who it is?
Yeah. The backwater boys. I think they started recently too, and
Yeah.
they're crushing snook on them. So it's
Mhm.
kind of crazy to see like the freshwater and the saltwater kind of like showing them something new is shaking the game a little bit.
Yeah, and even like Lawson, he is like starting to fish swim baits quite a bit, and he's starting to see like a lot of fish results come from it, whether it's bass or saltwater stuff. Loose term swim bait stuff, not like glide baits and whatever, not, but like big jointed baits and that
Hmm.
sort of thing, and even the citizens and stuff. So it's super cool to see like the snook fishing thing. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Snook Snacks, but like they fish the
Hmm.
shine glides and a couple other
Yeah.
baits like in the spillways, and I mean they just catch tank snook, and it's like damn, like there's more to it than just largemouth and smallmouth bass. Like it's really fun to see bycatches with swim baits, and it's something that people don't talk about or people don't bat an eye towards. But if I see a guy holding a brown trout that he caught on a 6-inch glide bait, I'm like, dude, that's way cooler than a 4-pound bass in my opinion.
Yeah. And I don't know. I'm excited to see where it goes. Like with all these people bringing more recognition to it. And that's why I kind of think about the 2010 days where like these were the first people to pick up these baits and they had crazy results. Like I'm wondering how it's going to be in the next 10 years or 20 years when like maybe it picks up with a lot of people, maybe it picks up with everyone, or maybe it just stays how it is now. Like maybe people don't expand on it too much more than it has been already.
Right. You said you have like, or you said you work in class zero at some point in time. Have you fished a lot of soft baits down there? Like a soft bait, something you have confidence in down there, or is it kind of hard with the water you fish, or kind of what's the soft bait experience like around you?
So once I picked up the paddleboard, that was like the big that was like probably the most recent step up. Like buying the paddleboard was a really good choice, I guess is the word. Like it's gonna like it helps me a lot. And that's kind of the around the same time where I realized how useful the soft bait can be because I mean the ponds in here, if you could find a pond that's deeper than 15 feet in the middle, that's a blessing. Like you could definitely drag a soft bait in there, but like all the ponds I fish are probably 10-foot max. So like the wake walker that cranks down like just below a foot or somewhere around there, like that range is perfect. So I never really had an interest in the soft baits and ponds, but once I got the paddleboard and I started fishing the lakes, and I noticed that maybe the eights, nine, tens, 11, 12, 13s, those aren't going to be sitting right on the bank next to a dock. That's when I started picking up like the working class zero stuff. And those are I mean, I've had a lot of success on other soft baits, but the working class zero stuff is seemed to be the magic recently.
Yes, foreshadow a little bit. We will be having Mr. Mike Gilbert on sometime very soon. But yes,
Ooh,
the citizen. Uh, are you familiar with Keith at all? He used to work with Working Class Zero like a year or two ago.
I'm not.
I will send you some of his.
Enlighten
Unfortunately, he took his page down, but there's still some YouTube videos of him fishing like on Kissimmee or Okeechobee or wherever it may be. But like he used to put in some serious work with that 6-inch citizen. He had his own color. Like
me.
dude was a hammer with the citizen, and I was just like, damn, like I want to fish a soft bait in Florida. Like you guys have a lot of grass, like some spots have a lot of grass and stuff, and just being able to work the Citizen through there. I mean, dude, I cannot imagine a more fun bite. Like you can, if you have a 6-inch Citizen, you can essentially fish it like a frog coming through pads and stuff. And
Hmm.
I mean, man, it's an absolute hoot and a half.
Oh yeah, that's actually how I've been fishing it more recently because it's not in the dead of summer, so I'm not limited to just dragging a soft bait at the bottom. That's my only big bite of the day. I think it was last time I went fishing right before I went camping. I was like skipping it under docks and reeling it on top, and I got a bunch of sick eats that way, and it was nothing big, but it was fun to see how they react to it. And that was kind of the first time where I've really had success with the Citizen, like not just dragging it on the bottom super slow. So that kind of opened my eyes as to like all the different things you could do with all these soft baits.
Yeah, it's a really fun bait and just a really fun like technique. I'm actually gonna be doing a video on soft bait stuff. I was working on the intro and stuff, but it's gonna be pretty fun video. But yes, the soft bait stuff like on top, like burning it across pads and stuff. Marshall and I found ourselves in a situation where we didn't have any frogs or anything or wake baits that we could fish in the fish in the weeds. So we were fishing 6 and 7 inch Citizens over grass cover and stuff. Didn't get any hookups. I had a bite or two, and I think Marshall had a blow up, but very fun. Mr. Phoenix used to do it up in Minnesota with the 7.5 inch battle shad, and he caught, I think, like almost a 7 pounder up there, which is an absolute tank of a fish for
Mhm.
Minnesota.
Wow.
But what were we talking about? Soft baits, paddleboard. So was the paddleboard essentially a purchase from watching Marshall? Like, damn, this guy can do it like in huge bodies of water. I can do it in smaller ponds around me.
Yeah, so I saw Marshall fishing it, and I kind of had the same idea as him to where, like, I fished kayaks for a while, like some of my friends, I would hop in theirs and fish them, and it never really appealed to me. Like wherever your nose is pointing, you can't do anything about it unless you drop your rod, pick up the paddle, and move it yourself. Like that was just like that's just too much work. And considering the space, like you're just trapped in this little sphere of or cone of a vessel. So when I saw Marshall fishing the paddleboard and I saw him kind of break down like how it works, like it's a completely flat space. You could do whatever with it. Like you could stick a crate on the back with the GoPro on top, like that, and you could like stick your feet off the side to point your board where you want to go, and it's way easier to paddle. Like that all was really uh eye catching.
Yeah, the big thing for me was that I could fit it in my car. The barrier of entry was very low, and
Hmm. Oh yeah.
you can hop off it and get back on it way easier than you can a kayak. You know, if you get
Hmm.
on a kayak and you
Exactly.
start to lean to one side, it does not take much to go ass over kettle. Whereas a
Hmm.
paddleboard, dude, I've stood up and like leaned on it pretty hardcore, and I've never flipped it or anything. So it's kind of like the pros with what little cons there might be. The pros, in my opinion, just outweigh them tenfold.
Yeah, dude, I go in the middle of the lake when I'm dragging a softbait. I just flip off mine when I'm bored. Like I go up in the front and I just front flip off of mine. And granted, front flip maybe isn't the right word. That's a little bit too glorified of what this maneuver is. But like I could jump off mine. I could walk all the way around it. I could stick both feet off the end. Like it's perfect. You could. It's the Swiss Army knife.
Yeah, yeah, 100%, dude. It's like I said, it's very cheap. I got mine for like $130 off Amazon. I've had it for 2 years. It's caught me a lot of big fish. It's caught me a lot of fish in general, and it's just like, yeah, it was a
Hmm.
no-brainer investment looking back on it now.
Oh yeah, and especially like I took Marshall on the main lake that I fish, and he was telling me about like his Florida experiences and the spots he was going to, and I was like, dude, these lakes are huge. And I was like, we kind of talked about it, like fishing those big lakes on the paddleboard, and he said it's not really that much of an issue. So I think that's what I'm gonna try and do over this like during the spring. I'm gonna try and find new spots that are maybe a little bit bigger and hold bigger fish so that I can because that'll probably be the easiest time to find a new spot.
Right. Tomorrow when you're fishing with him, ask him about fishing Lake Michigan pier heads off the paddle boards. That was a very interesting experience. We had like 3 foot rollers, and Marshall couldn't even buy a bite on the
Ooh.
worm. Somehow I caught one on the glide bait. That was a very interesting day. Very, very interesting day. But so yeah, we'll talk about so obviously you had probably been watching Marshall for about a year, so if not a little bit longer. What was it like when you guys got to go fish together the other day? What was that? I mean, I guess how did it lead up to that point? Like, did you message him and kind of go back and forth and he just was like, "Hey, I'm going fishing. You want to come out with me?" Or kind of how did that all unfold for you?
So I think I'd been watching him since maybe just, I want to say November, December of last year. So like almost like a year upcoming. And I was like reposting his stuff. I was like watching the YouTube and stuff. And his like, I don't know, his content just really resonated with me. And I don't know exactly how it went, but I remember the one DM when he said, "I'm coming to." This was right after he left Florida, actually, and he went up to Minnesota and then went back to Texas for a little bit. Came and fished with you. I think that was around the time where he first DM'd me and said, "I want to fish with you when I'm back in Florida." And I thought of it. I was like, "That's gonna be really cool. I get to fish with him." And so I messaged him back. I was like, "Yeah, that's cool. Let's do it." And so he came back to Florida recently. And then we scheduled a trip and we went out to my lake and we had a good time. And then I guess it was kind of toward the end of our fishing trip where we were like at this pond and we were just goofing off essentially. And we got to talking, and this is when I kind of realized that like we like this was kind of when I realized I was like, oh, I'm fishing with the guy I've been watching for this long. Like, that's crazy. And and then I think after that we scheduled a few other trips, which is crazy to think. Like, it wasn't just a one and done deal. Like, I meet Marshall and that's the end of it. Like, we have a bunch of other stuff planned, which is crazy to think about. If you would have told me a year ago, I would have said that's not true. You're lying.
Heck yeah, dude. That's so awesome. I mean, like being able to fish with Marshall, obviously he talks about stuff in YouTube, but like when you're able to fish with him and you're able to bounce your ideas off of him, and obviously he fishes for a living, so he can tenfold the experiences on the water that I have. So like whenever I have
Hmm.
ideas or thoughts and stuff, I'll talk to him in Phoenix and they'll tell me their experiences. But like being able to fish with Marshall and him being like, hey, I think this is what we should do because this is kind of how this spot sets up in Texas or wherever in Minnesota. This is I've had success with this spot before, this style bait because this is what the moonrise is looking like. It's like, dude, you're talking to a guy who knows a thing or two at least.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said before, like I never really had an older role model in my life to teach me about fishing. So now like I'm fishing with Marshall all the time, and like he's in the same, I guess, like genre of fishing that I am, and he's great at it. So it's crazy to think that now I have someone who I could talk to and he could teach me a lot and this, that, and the third.
Yeah, dude, exactly. And I mean the the Marshall you guys see on YouTube is the Marshall that that you fish with. I mean, he doesn't put anything
Yeah,
on for
exactly.
anybody. I mean, Marshall is Marshall, no matter what content you're consuming, whether it's in person fishing with him or watching YouTube or Patreon. I mean, Marshall is Marshall.
Exactly. He's very genuine.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So like, did you get to pick his brain about a lot of stuff, or like ask him like, hey, this is where I think we should go. This is kind of how they set up, and like, was he able to give you feedback, or I guess kind of like, were you able to kind of learn some stuff with fishing with him? I guess is the easiest way to put that.
I have learned a lot. So one thing that I did really kind of not bug him, but one thing that I kind of picked apart was soft bait fishing, because I thought this lake was huge. Granted, I took Marshall and he was like, "Dude, this thing's tiny." And so we fished. We looped around once, and I was telling him some things because there's like this big hole in the lake. So I was telling him, I was like, "Yeah, I feel like if I could find that, I could pull some big fish out of there." But this lake, like, there's so much stuff. Like, there's docks over here and there's pads over here, but there's also the bottom where the big fish might be. So I asked him, I was like, where do I even start on a lake like this? And then he kind of broke it down for me, like looking for brush and how to do that and how to like calculate how deep certain parts are. And then and yeah, we didn't. I mean, we were dragging bottom for like maybe an hour, and he had a few fish come up. He actually had one that followed him all the way from the bottom up to his board, and he didn't even realize that he had it because it was swimming right toward him. But we never got to see that fish because it came off. But yeah, it was great to hear it like one on one with him. It was crazy to think about.
Yeah, what'd you think of the bait collection?
Oh, dude, I can't wait to fish with him and do the exact same thing. Look at all of his baits. I mean, overwhelming to say the least. It's too much.
What'd you think about seeing Ethel for the first time ever?
Shoot, okay. I thought it was gonna be a little bit smaller because
Right.
like you'd be surprised how many like vans there are like that in Florida. But
Right,
Ethel
yeah.
was a little bit bigger than I thought. So was Archie. Archie was like shockingly big, and I know he says that in his videos a lot. Like people think Archie's gonna get eaten by a bass, but dude, he's huge.
He is very, very big.
Yeah, he is. He's very large.
Um, but yeah, I mean, like the whole Marshall experience is it's what you see on YouTube, but it's fun to hang out with him and hear his stories, like where he's talking about like, I mean, I'm sure when you guys were together, he may have even talked about like fishing in Japan or like something crazy that happened to him in
Oh yeah.
Japan or like just all kinds of like little stuff that Marshall is a public public figure is kind of a weird word, but I mean that's what he is. He posts YouTube videos. He's
Yeah,
out there
yeah.
on a public platform. But like getting to hear stories of like stuff that wasn't on GoPro or stuff that he doesn't post or like experiences before he was on YouTube, like it's really fun. Like Marshall will talk about stuff like in a sense of fishing and you're just blown away because you've never experienced anything like that. And Marshall's the guy who's on the water enough that he experiences some crazy, crazy stuff.
Yeah, exactly. It was crazy. Like he told me a bunch of stories from Japan and him in Florida and in Texas and all that. And it was really cool to think that like he's been around so much and he's done so much like with the swim baits and like it's crazy to think about that he has all that in his head and he's just giving it to me for free.
Right, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, free content, man. Score. There was something else I was gonna ask. I guess was it cool to see like scrolling on Facebook and Instagram and Underground and stuff like you see all these baits that maybe you wouldn't have a chance at buying or maybe you don't have any reason to buy like a mother or ghost or whatever else it may be. So like being able to see Marshall and like see all his baits and like feel a Roman made mother, see how big it is, see how big the ghost or the frenzy is or the tyrant 10 or what just whatever it is. Like, I mean, dude, that's an experience in itself. Like Marshall has a library on wheels of swim baits and like I mean, you can just go and decide what bait, like test swim any bait you want and just make a decision right there on the spot. I'm never gonna waste $1 on this bait or this is the next bait I need to buy. Like that's another really, really fun thing about hanging out with Marshall.
Yeah, exactly. There were a ton of baits. Like one I could say 100% is the Chaser 300.
Yeah.
Like when I saw that for the first time compared to the mother, it was like it was crazy. Or like when I saw the mother for the first time, I was like, "Whoa, that's really cool." And then I picked up the mother chaser, not the 400, the other 300, like the smaller one. I was
Mhm.
like, "Dude, this thing is like I feel like I'd be able to throw that a ton. Like that looks. I like that bait a lot." But yeah, seeing a mother in person for the first time was crazy. The tyrants too. He showed me. He talked to me about the tyrants and his experiences with them, and seeing the mob walker too. I really wanted to get my hands on a mob walker, and now that I've heard a lot of stuff about him, and he's telling me this, that, and the third, I'm glad I got like an influence to who's had experience with all these different things to tell me uh what they're good for, what they're not good for, what they do good at, and what they do bad at.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, and that's like the fun thing. Like when Marshall came up here, I mean, I've got tubs of baits and like baits that Marshall's never seen or ever fished. So like There was one day we went to the lake and we literally just swam baits the whole time. Like it was like pouring, so we were just going through my boxes and his boxes, and we were tying stuff on and taking turns swimming baits and stuff. And Marsh's like, "Oh, I've never fished this thing. It fishes better than I thought," or X, Y, or Z, whatever. And it's just I don't know. Fishing with Marshall's an experience, and it's fun. And outside of the YouTube thing, Marshall is just a guy like us, but like we talked about, he just is a huge vast of knowledge that you can pick his brain about anything in like the fishing realm, and he has a story and experience for damn near any question you could ask him.
Yeah, exactly. It was great to talk to him in person and learn a bunch from him. One thing that I will say is he kind of because I brought it up earlier, but I didn't want to like say too much or talk about stuff that I don't know. But he did tell me a lot about the TK because I know he was like me where he told me he's fished the TK and he didn't really see the appeal to it, but now he's been fishing it way more in like the different modes, and he said he likes it a lot, and that's kind of how I felt at first. Like I picked up the TK and I really only fished it in glide mode, and like I cranked it down a little bit, and I thought it was cool, but when he showed me about like the V tail and stuff like that, I threw
Yeah.
that for a little bit, and I mean I lost my lip like last week, which is kind of unfortunate. But I fished it like that, and that was sick. Like I caught a few. I think I caught one fish on it, and then another fish like came up out of the water and knocked my lip out, which I don't even know how that's possible, but that happened. So I got to get a new lip. I think I'm just gonna steal one from Marshall if he's got an extra one. Don't tell him
Yeah.
that, but
No, that's the move. That's the move. Yeah, Marshall texted us last night and was like, or maybe it's 2 nights ago. Oh my gosh, the TK! I can't believe I haven't been fishing this bait more. It's so fun, whatever, whatever. And Phoenix and I, being up north, like the TK is kind of a staple in the early
hmm
spring. And so we were like, yeah,
hmm
dude, like it's a fun bait. And Marshall's like, I'm gonna fish the hell out of this thing. I'm gonna fish the K9 more because these are really fun baits to fish. It's just kind of funny. It's funny that like Marshall not necessarily overlooks, but maybe doesn't have experience with like certain baits that are a little bit easier to get your hands on or like a more readily available or more commonly fished. Like, maybe he's never fished an S-Waver 200 and he picks it up and he's like, oh my gosh, this is the best bait ever. And it's kind of like, that's funny. Like, you have a Rowan made, but you'd rather fish the S-Waver 200 that everybody has. I don't know. It's just kind of funny when Marshall finds a bait and he's like, wow, I am going to fish the hell out of this thing. And it's funny because Marshall will have success with it with fish that normally guys wouldn't have. And that's just because
hmm
Marshall knows where to fish it, knows how to fish it, knows when to fish it. Like it's all just everything in Marshall's mind just kind of mends together. And I mean, he is a very efficient fishing machine to say the least.
Yeah, exactly. Especially with a bait like the TK. I feel like a bunch of people have fished the TK. Like even if you're not too indulged in the big swim bait stuff, like I feel like if you're at least somewhat involved in swim baits, you know about the TK and you've maybe fished one. And the fact that he fished it and he didn't really see the appeal, but like now he does, like it's kind of crazy to think about. Like all these people have fished the bait and Marshall wasn't a fan of it up until now. Like it just goes to show that I don't know where I was going with that.
Just
It
different
does
strokes
go
for
to show
different
that.
folks,
It
essentially.
goes to show that he doesn't know anything about the TK and then he should quit fishing. Give it to me.
Yeah, yeah. Give it to me now, Marshall.
That's the only thing I could think to say.
Heck yeah, dude. Well, Noel, was there anything else that you were ready to talk about that we maybe skipped over, didn't get to?
Not really. I could definitely tell you this guy's name though. I just remembered that when I
Oh,
find it.
maybe let's wait till after, just in case. You say his
Yeah, yeah,
name
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah,
and I was like,
of
damn, dude,
course.
that's like a really good buddy of mine or something crazy like that.
That'd be a shame. His name's
No, I don't
Marshall.
I don't know too many guys on underground, so it probably would have been a safe bet, but we'll just keep that to ourselves for now. I don't
Of
know any of the
course,
scam
of
I
course.
I should reword that and say I don't know any of the scammers on underground, so we'll just keep that. If it was Facebook or Instagram, I could tell you, but we'll just save that for now, dude.
Yeah, of course.
What are what are the socials so people can follow you? If they listen to this episode and they're like, man, this Nole kid, I wanna follow him. How can they consume your free content?
Okay. So my Instagram is just NolesFishing, NOLES.fishing. Um, my TikTok, sorry, I have it pulled up right now. My TikTok is Nole.fl, NOLE period FL. And my YouTube is the same as my Instagram. And if you can't find it, it's linked in both my socials if you're
Heck yeah.
interested.
Heck yeah. And as always, I'll put all Noel's stuff in the show notes. You guys can go follow him as well as on Instagram. He'll be tagged on that post. If you guys want, I mean, follow him. He catches fish. It's fun because he's catching fish when it's 14 degrees out right now. So it's kind of like it's fun following the southern guys because maybe they're not necessarily always oh, excuse me, not always on fish in the winter, but it's like, man, he caught a 4 pounder. Like I'm catching 12-inch crappie and I'm excited. Like it's kind of fun to see stuff that's going on when you can't participate.
You guys can live through me, don't worry.
Yes, exactly, exactly. So you're gonna be fishing with Marshall the next couple days. That should be fun. Hopefully, you guys hammer some fish, make a couple cool videos out of that. Instagram, TikTok, YouTube.
hmm
I'm
I hope so.
trying to think of anything else that
I
we.
do have to say real quick, I believe we do have a Patreon video coming soon of a day we had
Oh, very nice,
recently.
very nice. Yeah, what is it? The
So,
homeless school fisherman? Is that what it is?
yep, that's it.
Yeah, I was about to say I'm on there, but I don't remember the name of it. But yes, if you guys want to go see Mr. Knowles and Mr. Marshall fishing, go check out the Homeless Fisherman Patreon. Subscribe to that, the Homeless School Fisherman. You can find that linked I mean, I guarantee it's linked in Marshall's bio on Instagram,
Mhm.
the Homeless Fisherman. So you can go watch that. That'll be dropping soon. Marshall's got a couple Japan videos on there, a couple Japanese technique videos on there that are super cool that probably won't see the light of YouTube or Instagram. So you guys want to go support that, you obviously can go do that. But outside of that, I think that is everything we had to talk to. If you guys aren't following the podcast or following the podcast page, I guess, Scales and Tails Media on Instagram, Scales and Tails on Facebook. We're going to be doing some stuff for 2025, working on the last issue for the zine of 2024. That probably will have a pre-order and then they probably will get shipped out after Christmas. I'm always scared to ship around Christmas because I don't want stuff to get lost. So we'll probably wait till a little bit after Christmas to ship those out or get the pre-order finalized. Outside of that, we're going to be doing some YouTube videos and stuff. I want to start doing some video interviews like with builders and stuff in person. Um, I think that's everything. We're going to start doing a weekly question too. So like when I drop out a podcast, I'll post the podcast on Monday. I'll ask the question and then Tuesday I'll make an Instagram post. So like the one question I have that I don't think we'll do right off the bat because it's such a good question is like if Mike Long had video evidence of cast catches like Butch Brown, would he have gotten canceled as hard as he did? That's not this week's question. I don't know what this week's question is, but when you guys are listening to this episode, if it's Monday, check back on the Instagram tomorrow on Tuesday, and we'll have a whole question pulled up. I just think it's something fun that everybody can comment their opinions on. Everybody can go vote for, and you guys can argue in the comments if you have varying opinions. But as always, I want to thank Mr. Nole for coming on the episode. He's a young guy on the come up. I honestly did not know you had started this year. That's pretty badass. It's cool that you started off with quote unquote like the custom production baits, supporting guys like Kyle and Marshall, dude. There's guys who have been doing this for 5 or 6 years who could care less about doing that, who fish ABS mass produced baits from huge bait makers that don't give a squat about garage guys, whether they make resin, ABS, or soft plastic baits. So I mean, dude, that's just badass. That's how you started, man. More people need to start out like that.
Yeah, I'm blessed. I'm glad I started the way I did. I wouldn't change anything about what I've done so far to get to now.
Right.
Thank you for having me. It was amazing. I appreciate it.
Yes, dude. Of course, of course. As always, I will have all Noel stuff in the show notes. You guys can go follow him on all the platforms if you don't already. Check out the Patreon at the Homeless Fisherman. You guys can go follow or watch that video that should be dropping soon. Maybe Marshall will have a YouTube video coming out with Noel for free that you guys can watch if you don't want to or aren't able to support Marshall directly. You guys will just have to wait a couple weeks. But As always, I want to thank Noel for coming on the episode. It was a fun one. Fun talking to a guy in Florida who maybe isn't crazy experience, but getting to hear his story in like almost real time on how he got into all this. Super fun to hear. And as always, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and we'll talk to you guys next time. See you guys.